So thank you again to everybody for joining us this afternoon. We have Mike Uchneat with the Penn State Huck Institute of Life Sciences and Miss Dana Rhodes with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Mike's going to be talking to us first about his experiences and expertise in plant patenting and what that process looks like, sort of tips and tricks to help anyone out if you or your students in program ever happen to pursue that process. And Dana's going to be joining in about 20 or so minutes to cover nursery and greenhouse licensure requirements and law, as well as the laws and policy governing interstate and international or production of plants for sale interstate and internationally. Very excited to hear what they have to share with us. We ask that you keep your microphones on mute. I will be monitoring the chat for any questions that you have along the way, which both Mike and Dana have welcomed questions along the way. We're going to try to save 5 to 10 minutes at the end for any remaining questions that you have also. So with that, enjoy, and Mike, take it away.
I am going to share my screen right here, and hopefully that all works. And we should be good now, I believe.
We got it.
All right. I just want to say hi to everybody. Glad to be here. I am, I guess, for about 20 years, I worked professionally as a plant breeder and have done a fair amount of work with patenting plants and such. I am actually not doing that right now. I work for the Huck Institute of Life Sciences at Penn State, doing non-plant work at the moment. But the plants are my love, and hopefully some of what we're going to go through today is kind of interesting and such. Let me see here. I was going to look at a couple things that I just kind of assuming that everybody here has some growing experience with plants. I'm kind of assuming that everybody has a greenhouse space or a plant growing space. And I'm also assuming a little bit that maybe you have at least some rudimentary plant breeding understanding, like F1 hybrids and such. And I don't want to go over that if we don't need to, but if that is an issue for anybody, I can review some of that. Let's see. I should say too, because I do work at Penn State, and we always like to say these things, but I am not a lawyer, so I'm going to present my experience with plant patents. But of course, it's a little bit different than what a lawyer might say. And before we get into talk on plants per se, I'm just going to real quick review a couple aspects of plant propagation because it is important for the patenting discussion. So, I guess the two methods of plant propagation we're going to run into most commonly are of course, seed propagation and then some form of cutting propagation. So whether it's termed asexual propagation, cuttings, tissue culture actually falls into this category because it's an asexual method of propagation. So would grafting and perhaps some other methods that you could come up with. The plant patenting process applies to the asexual propagation. So it applies to cuttings or other things along that way. Let me just make sure I got everything. And and we will touch on aspects of intellectual property and seed and such towards the end of this. Okay, so plant patenting, it kind of came into being with the Plant Patent Act of 1930. It was the first of this kind of intellectual property protection in the world. It is different than a utility patent. A utility patent is the kind of patent you would use to patent your new telephone or your new, gizmo that you've made up that has some value in the world. A plant patent is very much different than that, both in what it covers and how you go about getting it. As I mentioned, it applies to asexually propagated plants only. And interestingly, edible tubers are excluded from this process. So of course, edible tubers in this case are mostly we're referring to potatoes, so it does come into play with other things. And it's interesting, when this act came into being, it was primarily rose growers and fruit tree growers that were pushing for this Plant Patent Act. And the potato growers did not want it to be in here. And they used arguments such as the fact that the potato, which is both the propagule, is also the part that we eat, and it shouldn't apply. I don't know what they would think now, but it's the way it is right now. So not everything that's asexually propagated can be patented in this manner. If you are successful in a plant patent, you get 20 years of protection from the award, which means that you have the right to exclude others from propagating, selling, importing, exporting the plant or any of the parts of the plant. It protects that plant and any progeny, but it does not protect against sexual reproduction. So you can use that plant to create new seed off anything you want, and there is nothing problematic about that. And getting a plant patent, it varies a little bit, but I would say roughly costs about $5,000. So it's not an insignificant cost, but it's not crazy either. It's somewhat unusual for individuals to pursue a plant patent. Usually it's done in concert with a company, so the costs aren't, in most cases, borne by the individual. Let's see. So I stopped at Lowe's last night and took a few pictures. It's hard to find good plant pictures right now, but I did find a couple where we could talk about plant patents. So you see a proven winners plant here. I guess it's a dianthus. On the tag on the left, you can see that it's a plant name Paint the Town Magenta. But if you flip the tag over at the very bottom on the back, inside that circle that we can't read, it discusses aspects of a plant patent. And I'm going to go to the next one for a second here. And even when I blow it up, I still can't read it. But it does say that this is a patent for the plant, whatever it was, whatever dianthus. And it'll say, it says something like US plant patent number or USPP 29222 or something along that lines. And it also says propagation is prohibited. So the next time you're at a garden center or something, you can look for that tag. Now the trick is, though everything that is patented should have a tag that lists the patent on it, that is not actually the case. I guess I'm picking on, I was at Home Depot, not Lowe's, and I'll pick on Home Depot for a little bit. But Home Depot, of course, wants to have their tag on everything, and they want to put what they want on their tag. And they're not so worried about plant patent law. So they may have a tag on there that actually doesn't have the patent number. It's kind of a controversy in the industry and everything. But should you be looking for a plant patent number on a plant and not find it, it doesn't necessarily mean that the plant is not patented. Skipping ahead a little bit, I found a couple other tags here. The one on the left is for Adelosperma. In this case, the plant name is actually whatever that says there, Wow Day 2. That's the name of the plant. Now, that's not the name that they're going to sell the plant under, but that is the patent name. A lot of companies will patent plants under some kind of a code name, because then they can change the trade name as they need to. So they could sell that as, you know, yellow and orange for 10 years and then decide that it fits in a different program better and call it some other name. And they still get the patent protection as long as the tags continue to say Wow Day 2, which nobody really is going to worry too much about. At the bottom of this tag, you can also see it says USPPP, I think, on this one. But what that's indicating that the patent plant patent has been applied for. So they haven't actually been given their patent yet, but they're letting the world know that they have applied for a patent on this. And in most cases, it will say something along the lines of asexual propagation is prohibited. If we look over at the tag that's on the right there, if you look at right at the top, it says Corstrolem, something along those lines. That is actually the name that they patented this plant under. And if you look a little bit further down, you can see that it's Coreopsis strawberry lemonade. And if you kind of cut off the first few letters at each, that's how they got their Corstrolem. Again, it says unauthorized propagation prohibited. And I know it is on there. It's plant patent number 18299. They actually have a European patent on here as well, which is that other number that you can see. So this is where you're going to kind of see this information out in the world, that a plant does actually have a patent, and we'll get into why that's important a little bit later.
Mike, quick question for you here before you get too further.
Yes.
With asexual propagation prohibited, does that mean that you as the homeowner that purchased that plant, if after a few seasons want to divide it, that's prohibited?
In a technical sense, yes. You are not allowed to create any propagules off of that plant. Now, I can assure you they are not going to come check what's going on at your home. But legally, you are not allowed to apply it. There's been some discussion at different times about whether, like, for teaching purposes or research purposes, can you propagate it if you're just using it and throwing it away? And again, technically, you are not allowed to do that, though I do believe it's done with some regularity. In the industry, they actually do send inspectors out to actually look at, a greenhouse operation and make sure that they are not doing that. In most cases, they manage that by one plant, one tag. So if you bought 10,000 tags, you better not have 12,000 plants, or they will actually fine greenhouses. It's a fine line because they don't want to be the bad guy. They want people to buy the plants, but if you don't monitor it a little bit, it can get out of control. So it is a fine line these companies have to walk. That's a good question. So we can look for plant patents numbers and such on tags in the garden centers and such. If you're really kind of curious about it, you can actually search for it online. And I find this kind of fun to do. If you go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and I don't have a URL up there because every time I want to find it, I just Google US Patent Office and I get this screen. And looking across the screen, you can see all kinds of stuff on here. You can see plant patent searches on the left side there. There's quick searches, advanced searches. I've never done anything but a quick search. It's always served me well. And on the right side, you can actually see applications. So you can see things that have been applied for, but maybe not granted yet. It takes a good year plus to get through the system. So as a plant breeder, I spend a lot of time on here looking at what plants are available. Sometimes I see a new plant, and again, I can't look up the name necessarily, but I might be able to figure out whether or not a company has applied for a patent on that particular plant. If I click on the quick search button, it'll take me to this screen. And basically all the quick search button does for you is gives you a smaller set of search fields, which is what I like. And you can see I inserted the word petunia. I think most of us are probably familiar with petunias. And I left it so that it's searching in all fields because I want to know if there's a petunia in the title or anywhere in the document is what I'm looking for. And then if I hit the search button, it takes me to the results page. And on the results page, I can see right at the top there, results and search provided 7,023 patents. And I'm just looking at the first few here. The very top one is a plant patent. And you can tell that because the patent number starts with PP. And as I said, these are very different than a utility patent, which again, we'll touch on a little bit later. Below that one, all of the rest of those are utility patents. So the one that's chimeric insecticidal proteins, that's patent number 11,274,000, et cetera. But you can see the petunia patent granted here was number 34,032. So there's a lot more utility patents in the system than plant patents, but the plant patent numbers have been increasing rapidly recently. There's other things I can see here too. I can see that the plant patent is for a petunia plant named KLEPH, whatever. Like I said, sometimes there's goofy names that the plants are patented under so that they can use different marketing names later on. If you look at the first three letters, KLE, that's going to come into play when we go to the next slide. I guess it'll be the slide after this. Clicking on that and looking at that plant patent, this is what I see at first. So this is the actual patent. If I click on that PP 34032, petunia plant named, etc., this is what it'll bring me up to. This is page 1 of the actual patent application, or the patent that's been granted. You could see their claim. So every patent, whether it's a utility patent or a plant patent, has a claim. What did you say you created? What have you created that's new and not obvious? And in this one, it's a new and distinct petunia plant named that goofy name. And then there's apparently an illustration attached, and it's described. In the description, you get the genus and species, the variety denomination, which again is that goofy name. And then if you read through it, it's kind of interesting. It tells you it's botanically a petunia. It tells who the parents are. It tells when the work was done on this. And at the very bottom, it gives a little bit of a summary on things that might be unique to this particular plant compared to other plants that you might look up. Again, as a plant breeder, I find all of this information very interesting, and I search frequently for this kind of stuff. I should note that in a patent declaration like this, you are supposed to disclose as much information as you can. So somebody with a reasonable skill could go ahead and recreate your plant if you want. I would argue that in the vast majority of patents that is not done, because of course people want the protection of a patent, but they don't really want to tell everybody how to get there. So it's kind of a goofy thing. It frustrates the daylights out of me. Okay, going to the next page on this patent that we've been looking at here. It just gives you some more information. What I wanted to do on this one is look at the description of the new variety, which is the big fat paragraph there. We're not going to read through it, but if you start looking in there at the words in there, you can get into a lot of plant systematics. You can get into a lot of botany descriptions. And when you're actually preparing the patents to be submitted, I'm the one that actually takes all these measurements and provides them to the lawyers that process the patents. It's a pretty intense effort. It's actually also hard because when you talk about, the length of the basal branches, in this case, they said 30 centimeters. Well, length of the basal branches when the plant's young, when it's a very mature plant, it can vary quite a bit. So it requires some kind of discretion as you go through this. You can also see the RHS numbers, and if you've used color charts in the past, everything gets a color denotation, which again, those are going to, especially the leaves, stems, etc., those are going to vary depending on the fertilizer regime. So I check my time. So that's kind of what a patent is and where you can find some information on it. And I just want to talk a little bit about maybe if you found a plant that you might be interested in patenting. And you have to ask yourself the questions: was it found in the wild? Was it found in the garden center? Was it in your garden? Did you grow it from seed? The first three there, if it was found in the wild, found in a garden center, or found in your garden, in all likelihood, you probably should not be patenting it. Anything found in the wild had no human intervention, so it is not technically patentable. And if you found in a garden center or it was found in your garden, it's highly likely that somebody else has already beat you to it. You just don't have the tag with it that says it's been patented. If you grow from seed, maybe not. If it's commercial seed, it may be possible to patent out of it. It's going to be depend a little bit. But if you actually made the seed yourself and then sowed it out, it is most certainly patentable. And I think if you're looking at a school program and want to make this applicable, that is where you could potentially have some fun with this, where you actually do some crosses and then grow out the progeny. You found your cool plant, grown it out, and how do you protect it? Well, there's fees associated, but you're not going to pay them. What you're going to do is you're going to find a partner out in the industry that's going to help you through this process and help pay for the costs that are involved. So if you walk through the garden center and you look for those non-Home Depot or non-Lowe's tags, you're going to see names like Proven Winners and Monrovia. You might see Terra Nova, Ball Horticulture. Those companies all have plant discovery divisions. And if you go on their websites, you'll be able to find a place where they will help people that have found a new plant. If you go down to the road to your local nursery, they might be interested, but they're probably not going to have those connections into getting you into the right hands as far as getting a plant through the patent process. I don't know how else to write this, but your kind of wholesaler greenhouse, your national suppliers, the big greenhouses that supply propagules throughout the industry, they can probably help you. They'll at least have the right connections, and they may even be able to do it themselves. So it seems like it's probably a complex process to navigate, but the real issue is finding somebody that's interested in your plant. You don't share your plant with them, you only share pictures. From those pictures, they may say, yeah, I'm pretty interested in learning more about this. And then you're going to work with that partner the rest of the way. Honestly, I would let them lead the process. They'll tell you what you need to do. There are some people out there that probably could be a little bit unscrupulous about working with others, but they don't last in the industry very long. I would trust the vast majority of the companies that you're going to see on tags. It didn't always be that way, but I think it's probably a safe bet right now. Your partner is going to take in your plant under contract. You're going to have a document that says, if you give me this plant, I will do this for you. And you tell them that you're giving this plant in order that they can investigate whether or not it has commercial potential. They'll trial it across the country, determine whether it's good enough, and then they'll help you with the introduction process. If a plant did go commercial, they will collect royalties off of this. So royalties might vary from, in most cases, from, I don't know, a nickel to 25 cents on a plant. Every one of those plants that sells out in the world, this royalty comes back to the breeder, or comes back to the breeder and the company that helps commercialize it. And that might be a negotiated amount. But if you can come up with a plant that does make it through all of the testing processes and goes commercial, there should be royalty income back to you. Now, these companies that help pay for this patent are going to first reimburse themselves with those fees out of your royalty monies. It might be a little bit negotiable with them, but that's kind of the standard practice. But what you could do is, if you actually did get to this point, you should also think about what else you want from them. And supplies, free plants, all that kind of stuff is certainly on the table. I will say that these companies that do this, they're excited to find people that nobody's worked with again. So, high schools and community classes that could put together a project where you're actually doing unsophisticated plant breeding with, all of the learning that you can incorporate into the classroom. And as you grow out those seeds that you've created, if interesting things come about it, I'm pretty sure you're going to find people that are actually interested in it.
Mike, before you continue
Yeah.
on, we do have a question in the chat from Adam Surfoss at Conrad Weiser High School. Is CRISPR technology being used for creating new patentable varieties of plants, and or how is CRISPR affecting the plant patenting process?
So I guess the easy answer is I don't know, because CRISPR is not regulated in the way that what was traditionally called GMOs was regulated. Traditional GMOs with the agrobacteria mediated gene transfers were highly regulated, and CRISPR is not regulated in the same way. The problem actually comes into the fact that if you use CRISPR technology, you actually you need to have a patent license from the people that invented the CRISPR technology. So that technology actually has patents behind it. And using that technology without paying royalties back to the folks that developed that technology is potentially illegal, or at least puts you in jeopardy that they could come knocking on your door. So whether any companies have negotiated access to that technology is not going to be common knowledge. Personally, I don't know of anybody that's introduced CRISPR technology. I do know of multiple companies that are working with CRISPR technology right now. Now, again, whether they ever commercialize or not, I don't know. Whether they actually make it known that they've commercialized it, I don't know. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that's where I see things right now on CRISPR. It has the potential to totally revolutionize this. And it partly will depend on how willing the inventors of CRISPR technology are to license their technology. The licensing in the medical field, they're going to be getting millions and millions of dollars per license. That kind of dollar amounts just doesn't work in ornamental plant breeding. The licensing fees would have to be very insignificant for it to matter. So again, we can jump back into that at the end if that didn't completely cover that. I'm just trying to think of how I could relate this a little bit to what you guys do in the schools. And I was thinking about propagating for plant sales. And like I had said earlier, that may be illegal. Again, no one's going to come knocking. But what I would actually do is whoever you're getting that material from, I would just simply ask them, do you have permission to propagate it in an educational setting and sell the plants afterwards? I guarantee you they're going to say that's no problem. And even beyond that, you may be able to call these companies and simply ask for donations and get them. If one turns you down, call the next. Most of these places are dying to help bring along the next generation of people that love plants. They want to help. You might just get somebody on a bad day. Growing from seed is generally without restrictions. Saving commercial seeds sometimes could be problematic, but you're not likely to run into that. And of course, as I mentioned, you don't have to worry about royalties. That's taken care of in other parts of the product stream. I'm just guessing, John, that I'm probably at the end of the amount of time you wanted me to take. Just maybe give me a feedback on that. I can go another couple minutes here. Or
yeah, I mean, if you want to go another 5 minutes, I think we're good. Okay.
So I mentioned, we talked pretty much about plant patents here, and plant patents cover vegetatively propagated plants. There are other forms of intellectual property protection that you can apply to plants with U.S. patents or utility patents, plant variety protection, trade secrets, trademarks, etc. And just some quick thoughts on some of these things. With U.S. patents, which I actually mean utility patents, they're expensive. You're probably looking at 10 to 15 grand to get it prosecuted, and then they have recurring maintenance fees with them. There's a pretty high barrier to entry. Now there is increasing industry interest on these. The agronomic crops do use these pretty extensively. And of course, there's the controversy that comes with it about whether or not, companies should be patenting, foods and things like that. So that could be kind of an interesting discussion. Going down from there, plant variety protection. This applies only to seed propagated plants. It comes into play most often with things like self-pollinated crops. So things like alfalfa, soybeans. They can't be vegetatively propagated, and you can't really make F1 hybrids out of them easily. So this is the method that you protect those with. They keep a sample on file in some repository, et cetera. In the ornamental world, Salvia splendens is one that comes in mind that has a few plant variety protections. Same thing with zinnias. There's plant variety protection on zinnias as well. Another way to protect things is trade secret. This is generally what is used in F1 hybrids. If you don't tell somebody what the parents are or don't give the parents to them, they cannot possibly recreate what you've created. So simply not telling you gives you a maximum amount of protection. And of course, that's cheap. If you don't tell anybody, it doesn't cost you anything. And again, you could find some interesting trade discussions here on different kinds of industrial espionage. There was an issue a number of years ago with, I believe it was in corn, where there were Chinese scientists over here walking cornfields in the Midwest looking for inbred parents, because of course the seed cleaning processes as such is not perfect, but they were collecting these parents and taking them back. So you can find some interesting activities in that area that are that have legal implications. And of course, trademarks are used pretty widely. Doesn't give you actually protection on the plant, but it gives you protection on what you call the plant. So anybody could sell that plant, but they can't sell it under the name that you provide. And this is generally a cheap process that's used fairly widely, at least in ornamentals. So I just had to kind of whip through those pretty quick because I wanted to focus on plant patents. It's probably the predominant method right now in the ornamental horticulture world anyway. But I think it's important to touch on these. And I believe, yes, that is my last slide.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. That was great information and fascinating all at the same time.
And I'm stopping my share here, so hopefully it opens it up for everybody else.
Sure. Okay, we're now going to transition to Dana with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Dana's pulling up her presentation right now, and we're going to hear about some of the laws and regulatory policy regarding nursery and greenhouse licensure. Dana, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Can you just see the presentation slide up there?
Yep.
Is it in the proper? Okay. Very good. Thank you. I am going to leave my camera off to make sure that I can broadcast to you and you can see the presentation. But thank you for the invitation to talk. To give you a little bit of information about me, I am the state plant regulatory official, which means I oversee the nursery greenhouse certification program and our plant merchant licensing. I also oversee quarantine pest, the pathology and the entomology labs fall under my division. So I work with all of them very closely. So I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what Pennsylvania Department of Ag does for you. When you were talking about nursery business and moving nursery stock, glad to know that you are the teachers who are preparing our next group of horticulturalists coming in. We desperately need you, so thank you all very much. I also want to say that the inspectors that work for the department are not the inspectors that are looking for patented varieties. So those are usually employed by the private companies themselves. They would not be with the department. So the authority for the plant merchants comes under the Plant Pest Act of 1992, and it allows for licensing, inspections and sampling, phytosanitary certificates and agreements, for quarantines, treatment, and surveys. So we do quite a bit with this particular law. And why do we need it? Well, we're trying to protect the environment and agriculture. Key here is prevention of pest movement. We want to make sure that what's coming into the state and moving around the state doesn't carry with it potentially damaging products that or disease or pest that could impact agriculture and our environment. We're also promoting safe trade. We're setting a base for industry, and of course, we're protecting consumers. So plant merchant license are required of growers, for landscapers, brokers, and retailers. So if you sell a plant that has a root on it and is moving forward, that needs to be licensed. Your company needs to be licensed. So all the big box stores, mom and pop operations, they all need to come get a license. And that gives us multiple routes that I'm going to explain why that's important. So it is a $40 annual fee, and you can apply online, or you can go to our webpage, which is www.agriculture.pa.gov, and go. Just the easiest way is to put in the search box plant merchant, and it will take you right to the page, and you can print out an application if you would prefer to do that. So part of being with the system, you're registered with us. It allows the inspector to come in and look for pests of concerns, or pests that you might have a high volume on. Some of the regulatory pests that we're constantly looking for, Phytophthora ramorum, or sudden oak death, you might know it by. It is not present in Pennsylvania, but we are very concerned what it could do to our oak, which is 25% of our forested hardwoods. Ralstonia, there are several different species here. Some of them are extremely bad. One of them is actually a select agent as defined by USDA. So that one would be extremely bad. Then we have things like Xanthomonas, boxwood blight, and our newest insect is box tree moth. Again, box tree moth is not in Pennsylvania, but we do survey for it. And then they're also looking for common pests like aphid, scale, mealybug, to give you an idea. When they are out of control, the inspector is going to talk to you. We would recommend working with extension educators to find out the right treatment that would work for you, because you might have an organic nursery, or you want to make sure that you're applying the right pesticide to take care of whatever you might have. The inspectors are also going to give you information regarding new pests that we might know are on the horizon, that might be moving through nursery stock, whether it's in the United States, in other parts of the world. We are a global society now. The patented varieties are moving quite a bit around the world. So you never know what those new pests are and where they might come from. So your inspectors will give you insight on that. We also provide information on, let's say Phytophthora ramorum, we know came from a state that has it, and there's a possibility that a shipment came into Pennsylvania and maybe it came to your facility. The inspector will come visit you, they'll do an inspection, they'll do some sampling, so we can try and determine if it's actually there or not. If you are going to do business out of state, you need phytosanitary certificates or compliance agreements. This is required by states. And when you are doing interstate business, you have to, whoever's selling, and this is through email sales, this is through you grow the product and you ship it to them, you broker, and you just make arrangements to ship to other states. You have to meet the requirement of the state that you are shipping to. Many times I get a call, people say, yep, I just started my business and I want to go on Amazon and I want to be one of their people who are selling. And what do I do? Well, the first thing you need to do is go to nationalplantboard.org, and there you will see the summaries of all the laws from all the states, and you need to take a look at them to really determine if you want to do everything a state may require of you. And different states have different requirements. The Western states, like California, Oregon, and Washington, do not have Japanese beetle. So we do. We know how to deal with it. We manage it. They do not want it. It's a high pest of concern for them. So they have different steps that you have to take before you can ship a product into their state from here. So you have to be familiar with those laws. You have to be inspected. And you have to notify an inspector before you ship it. Sometimes I've gotten calls, California stops a truck and they'll say, Dana, we can't find this nursery. Are you familiar with them? And if we have no knowledge, they will either reject the shipment, meaning it cannot be delivered, or they may actually take and do destruction of the plants, especially if they find a pest of concern. So please, please make sure as you're teaching everyone who may be going through and opening their own nursery or landscape business, make sure that you're following the other laws of the states that you're going to be doing business with. Compliance agreements. It's kind of like a phytosanitary, but it is a year-round agreement. So the facility contacts us, they let us know what products they're shipping, what they're growing, where they're going to ship to. We confirm that they can meet the standards of each of those states, and then we've signed this agreement. We do require it for growers who are shipping multiple times a year. If you're just doing it once a year, don't worry about the agreement. The certificate will work. We also require it if you are in the spotted lanternfly quarantine and you are shipping to other states. You must have a compliance agreement to do that. But what it gives you or the grower is flexibility to ship. You don't have to wait on an inspector to come out and do an inspection and issue the certificate. If you get the order on Tuesday and you want to ship it on Wednesday morning, you can do that as long as you have the compliance agreement. We do get requests from the other states wanting to know if it is a valid agreement. So again, we do provide a nursery certificate that you can show them, and we have them on file with our office as well. And they are renewed annually because states may change their laws, and we want to make sure that you are current. We are always looking for pathways of pest movement. So nursery stock is certainly one of those ways, international trade, but there are lots of other ways too. You know, artisan woods, we have gotten phone calls before because people hear something chewing in their headboard. Or most recent one was someone had just bought a bamboo cutting board and they noticed an insect boring out of the cutting board itself. So there are multiple ways insects can move around, and so we're always looking for those. So that's part of what the department is doing for consumers. And we work very closely with other agencies. The USDA is a big partner. They handle a lot of international trade. And I don't know if you've ever been on international flights, but you might see the beagle walking through the airport, friendly, but they are actually working very hard because they are looking for that piece of fruit that someone may have put in their baggage, especially for Florida and California. That's a big concern with citrus. There might be seeds. You didn't realize that you shouldn't bring those into the US. So those dogs will actually just nicely sit down right beside the baggage, and then the inspector knows that there's something in there that they need to be taking a look at. Think about the pallets that are delivered. You know, your growing media are delivered on, or the fertilizer bags. Have they been properly treated? Those are a good way to carry pest as well. Those are all concerns. You may be doing everything right, but look at how you're packaging to move the product forward, or what you're bringing in, and is that a potential for pest? Again, interesting ways some of these move forward. Wood sculptures, we've had people call and let us know that they're finding boreholes in them and live insects coming out of furniture. It happens, unfortunately, far too often. I think you might be familiar with spotted lanternfly. Again, that was a pest that came through trade, not necessarily ag trade. Could have come in on wood packing material. It could have come in on tile. So again, just be aware. It is not a federal program. That is a state regulated pest, along with boxwood blight. Federally regulated Asian longhorn beetle or Phytophthora ramorum would also be another one that is federally regulated. So there are different types of quarantines. And when you are moving nursery stock, you have to make sure you follow state quarantines as well as federal quarantines. For the federal quarantines, all states uphold federal quarantines, and we may not be more restrictive than the feds when they put in a quarantine. So for Phytophthora ramorum, it is a pest that Pennsylvania is very concerned about. We have a lot of natural kalmia and rhododendron in our environment. So we are very concerned, again, there with the oaks. As much as I would like to put in a few more restrictions to protect Pennsylvania more, I'm not able to do anything more than the federal government has already done. So just be aware. And we do follow their mandates if we are receiving any federal funding for some of their programs. Currently, there are 3 quarantines in Pennsylvania. Firewood is the longest quarantine that we've had. That happened around the time where emerald ash borer was being discovered. Firewood was recognized as a potential pathway, so a quarantine was put in place. And basically that quarantine means if you are receiving wood with the intention to make it into firewood from another state, it has to be certified that it is pest-free. And it can be treated, it can be fumigated, it can be heat treated, but we do require that it is certified by another state or the feds prior to entering into Pennsylvania. And there are many states that have different types of firewood quarantines in place. And then we have spotted lanternfly, and then also boxwood blight. With those quarantines, usually there are many ways to mitigate. Like Japanese beetle, there are pesticide treatments that are allowed, or hemlock woolly adelgid. We do have people who ship hemlock out of the state to other states, and we just make sure that they are properly treated. Systems approaches can also be used. For spotted lanternfly, there's not one tool. So, you know, you can do an egg mass removal, you might do a pesticide application, and there are even some fumigations that would work for both spotted lanternfly or spongy moth, formerly known as gypsy moth. And then, you know, weeding. If you're growing bald and burlap and it's sitting above, please make sure that you're looking for weeds and grasses that other states are very concerned about. We want to make sure that we're not, you don't want your nursery stock to be the pathway for a pest like stilt grass to move. So make sure that you're inspecting and preventing those movements. For an example of a state quarantine, wanted to talk about boxwood blight. Pennsylvania was the first state to put in a quarantine on boxwood blight. This was first discovered around 2011, and USDA and the states came together along with industry. Discussions were held, and industry said, we really think that we can make sure that this doesn't move. And Pennsylvania agreed along with the other states. But how we found that industry wasn't policing enough. We were receiving a lot of positive material from other states. It was causing quite an increase in the amount of sampling that we were having to do and the amount of inspections that were having to be done across the state. And it was becoming quite costly to Pennsylvania companies and to homeowners. Please keep in mind when you bring in nursery stock from another state or even from another nursery in state, you are responsible for the destruction of that material if it's deemed it has to be destroyed, or even if there's a pesticide that can be applied, you become responsible if the state finds it and says we cannot allow this pest to be here, which can become very expensive. We've had some nurseries and growers who have spent tens of thousands of dollars in order to mitigate after receiving bad stock. So it is important. Once this quarantine went in place, we saw a drastic decrease in the number of positives coming into the state. Things were cleaned up, and there were some nurseries in other states that said, we're not going to ship to Pennsylvania. And that's okay. We got healthier stock. Homeowners had a better peace of mind that what they were going and purchasing was clean and healthy. So, and that has given time for science to work on new treatments, for breeders to find new resistant varieties for boxwood blight. So putting in quarantines helps slow down the spread and gives science and technology a chance to figure things out, and helps industry so that they can manage and determine how they can best incorporate to prevent the pest from getting into the stock that they are growing. So when we are doing the quarantine, we have the nursery stock. We look at internal sources. We look at the external sources that they're doing and ask them to be very cognizant of all of those. And then we use systems approach to management. And a systems approach is very flexible because not all growers are the same size. They don't operate the same way. So the state wants to understand how you function and what things can you do to prevent. And we will work with you to determine if yes, that's going to work. And you might put in more than one layer so that if one fails, you can then find another way to prevent the pest from moving. I have not always been with the state. Before coming here, I worked in the green industry for over 20 years. I was a grower. I had a garden center. I was a landscaper. So I understand the business, which I think helps me in these moments to say we need to understand the businesses that we're working with, and we need to understand how they operate and the impact that we're having on livelihoods. So please relay that message. The state really wants to work with growers. We really want to understand what we do and how that impacts all the green industries that we work with and protect. Regulated articles anymore, especially with spotted lanternfly, can just be about anything, from tile to equipment, wood slabs, nursery stock. I have seen many, many things come through with lots of different pests on them. I'm not surprised anymore by anything I find. So again, quarantines help slow the spread, and with global trade, it's very important. The map in the upper right shows you all the major trucking routes that are used to move products across the United States. Um, the lower left hand, the yellow, that's our airways. So FedEx, UPS, Amazon, that's how they're moving different products. And then the other one with all the nice bright colors, that's our shipping routes. And again, our products move in multiple ways, and those things change. So putting in the quarantines can help companies continue business and also allow safe trade with our partners. And what this means to Pennsylvania, these are why we put in regulation for nurseries and for other businesses, why we care about quarantines and pests not moving. We are the #1 exporter of hardwoods in the United States. That is a $19 billion industry for us. Tourism through our state parks. We're third, just behind Alaska and California. Fourth in greenhouse and nursery production. So we do have quite a bit to lose if we do not protect you as a grower and the imports that are coming into the state. So it's very important for us to take care of all of those things. And when I talk about, putting in quarantines and people think, well, they never work or you just slow the spread, it is important that they are there and they can work. I don't know if you're familiar with plumpox virus. That was in Pennsylvania and it was successfully eradicated. It did take years. And when you're talking to folks in regulatory, we will tell you eradication will not happen in days or weeks. It will take years, and it can take anywhere, close to 10 to 20 years to make it happen. But Pennsylvania was successful with this. So things I put down that I think you need to think about, and you can pass these along to your students, especially if they are going to make this a career. Be an informed consumer. Ask a lot of questions about the material that you're buying in, whether it is for breeding, whether it is for propagation, moving forward, doing tissue cultures or what have you. Was the person licensed? Are they inspected, especially if they're coming in from another state? And does the company have a history with quarantine pests, especially if you're dealing with out of state? Think about Florida. They have all kinds of diseases that can go on down there. They also deal with fire ant quite a bit. On the West Coast, Phytophthora ramorum, a huge problem. And if, depending on the time of the year, you may not see it coming in. But if it gets in and you're propagating, and then all your plants end up with Phytophthora ramorum, that's really bad. Pennsylvania takes a very aggressive approach with Phytophthora ramorum. We want it eradicated. It is not going to establish in Pennsylvania. When you do get that material, make sure you're inspecting it. Does it look healthy? If it doesn't look healthy, let somebody know. Maybe you want to call the state to say, hey, I just got this shipment in. Can you send an inspector out here and take a look and take a sample? Let me know what's going on. We might be able to provide results to you that you can then say, this was a bad shipment. I'd like to get some credit for it, please. And don't commingle, because once you commingle, what you receive, everything is dirty, okay? Consider using growers that are in the SANC program, which is a national program of systems approaches. They go above and beyond what are minimum requirements. They are signing agreements stating we are looking and testing our water. We are looking at how the water flows on our property. We are training all of our staff to know how to clean their tools, especially when they're propagating, making sure that they're using alcohol in between each variety. periodically wiping down the tables and making sure all the debris is swept off the floor and properly disposed of. And lastly, if you have a vendor who continues to send you bad material, please do not continue to work with them. They don't get it. And most of you have a deep passion for what you do and the information that you want to share and how you want to teach your students. Please teach them that. Do not continue to use someone who sends you unhealthy material. The biggest way you can tell them you cannot continue is to refuse to give them your money. So please, please do that. And just very lastly, if you have any questions, here's the contact information for folks in my office who would be very willing to find some answers. So please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer questions as we can.
All right. Thank you very much, Dana. Again, some fantastic information for us as educators. And on that note, Dana, we did have a question from Katie that runs a fantastic horticulture program at the Career Tech down in York County. She asks if a student wanted to start their own business as a grower. Are you aware of any websites? Does PDA have a website that can be a good starting point to direct them to the different state policies that they should be aware of and follow?
Katie, that's an excellent question. Our webpage is www.agriculture.pa.gov, and you can look for plant merchant. So that will help them there. The other one is www.nationalplantboard.org. And that is where you will find the summaries for all 50 states under their law section. You will find it there.
All right. Thank you again. Great question, Katie. Yes. So just to recap on some of the high points, and if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or prepare to unmute yourself to ask directly. But as educators, I don't know that that's something we take into consideration when we're buying starter plugs or plant material, for our spring greenhouses of we tend to be under the gun as far as time to get those things started, to get the students working with them, but maybe get them in a week earlier if you can. Let them sit for a while and just sort of observe what's coming out of them, what are they looking like. Great point, Dana.
Oh, well, thank you. And, having been there, yes, I know as fast as those plugs are coming in, you've got pots ready to put them in there. So I totally understand the rush of the season, but it can pay you to really just let them sit for a moment and just look at them and then come back to them. And again, we're happy to assist if you need some samples pulled. Excellent.
Yeah, utilize the Department of Agriculture that we have. We have a great Department of Agriculture here in Pennsylvania, and I think it's fitting and beneficial to your students to see what a good working relationship with your state government can look like. So excellent. Any other questions?